How did this meal exemplify the strength and fortitude of the Spartan people? Well, sit back. I'm jumping right in because there's a lot to discuss. The Spartans were tough, fierce, and feared in their era. In 820 BC, the man who may or may not have existed, the legislator Lycurgus, set a code of standards and laws for the Spartan people. Amongst this way of living was having austerity of military and really almost everything in life, equality of free citizens, health and physical fitness, and the discouragement of greed. In fact, early Sparta was so against the hoarding of wealth, they refused to use coinage. They chose to use a fairly impractical system of iron spikes, or obelos, which is where the coinage term obol comes from. And 6 of these obols, well, that makes a drachma. And in ancient Greek, that translates to pretty much what you could fit in your hand, how much you could grasp. It wasn't until towards the end of Sparta's supremacy that they started minting coinage, and in small amounts. In examples like this coin of King Arius I, there's only 4 in existence. And when it comes to equality of free citizens, it's women that's actually important to make note of here. When it comes to women, Sparta can be thought of as quite the progressive place. Lycurgus makes it known that women need to be educated, and that they need to remain physically fit, and participate in sports and athletics, and own land. When their husbands died in battle, the ownership of the property was transferred to the wife. A claim by Aristotle is that women owned 2/5 of Spartan land. Plutarch quotes the wife of Leonidas, Queen Gorgo of Sparta. When asked, "Why are you, Spartan women, the only ones who can rule men?" she replied, "Because we are also the only ones who give birth to men." And give birth to men they did. Spartan boys were raised tough from birth. Newborns were dunked in wine. Those that were strong barely cried. Those that convulsed, well, they would be left to die. Mothers had to be tough, for at the age of 7, boys began the process of agoge, the training program that turned them into warriors. So rigid was the training, these boys quickly became men, who quickly became feared warriors. These men did not fear death. All they wanted to do was prove their strength, and if need be, die for their country proudly. Their strength and dominance grew the state of Sparta. Now you can't discuss a peoples without their food. So, let's discuss today's dish of black broth. Now, black broth was as notorious then as it is today. It's said that a man from Sybaris once tried black broth, and said, "Now I do perceive why it is that Spartan soldiers encounter death so joyfully. Dead men require no longer to eat. Black broth is no longer a necessity." Which makes me stoked to prepare this meal. I'm starting off by cutting up 1 large white onion into a fine chop, and I'm going to brown that into a pot with a tablespoon of olive oil for about 10 minutes until they're golden brown, but not burnt. I do not want that burnt flavor. It's going to be bad enough as it is. So I'm going to add in some chopped pork. I chose to use just, boneless spare ribs. Getting that into a nice sear. Searing it, I think, is going to be important. Give it a little bit more flavor. Adding in a 1/2 cup of white wine vinegar, and I'm deglazing that pot. The smell, it's a little pungent, but not so bad. Adding in 3 cups of water. Giving this a little stir, I'm going to add in 3 bay leaves and a fairly large pinch of salt. And let that simmer for about 45 minutes covered. Now the part that I've been dreading, adding the blood. When buying this pig's blood, of which I only needed 2 cups, the gentleman asked me, "How many gallons of blood do you need?" A question I never thought I would be asked. I mean, I really shouldn't be afraid. Blood is, after all, filled with protein, vitamin D, iron, multiple nutrients that makes a person strong. It's actually quite common to eat. Multiple countries eat blood, from blood sausage to the Swedish bloodplotter pancakes. Even the French coq au vin was originally thickened by blood, not flour. And of course, southern Italy has the bloody chocolate dessert, sanguinaccia dolce. Now I'm going to briefly pivot here to a darker side of history. Not all of Sparta should be glamorized. They were quite the xenophobes. You have people like Machiavelli who try to point out that they lasted so long because of this, and that's why the Romans fell. And of course, you have the other lover of black broth, Hitler himself. The Nazi regime actually has many similarities to the ancient Spartans, from the way they trained their young boys to be warriors for the state, to the way that they committed infanticide by killing those infants that were less than worthy. And this was the same when Hitler signed Action T4, where those with disabilities and for eugenic purposes were murdered. The Nazis idolized the Spartans for their strength and power, but also for the way that they isolated themselves and the perfection of race. And this is what really led to the downfall of the Spartan people, amongst many other things. Their end came in 371 BC by the Thebans in the Battle of Leuctra. Alright, because nobody likes talking about Nazis, let's try and cheer this up a bit. I am going to add the blood into this soup. It is super bright red, and I did end up getting that little micro splashes all over the countertops, which my wife was not pleased about. I'm gonna stir this in, throw the cover back on, and let it sit for about 15 minutes simmering. And it is thickening up. I did add about a quarter cup more water just to thin it out. Now you can't tell me that doesn't look delicious. Alright, here's one that I've been a little afraid of trying. Mélas Zōmós. Black soup. Let's see how it is. Let's see if this makes me feel stronger. Like a mighty Spartan. It's so thick. The smell is it's like a bland, off-putting smell. I can smell that this has no flavor and bad flavor all at the same time. All right. It's not bad. It's not bad. It's the texture is super velvety from the blood. It's, yeah, I mean, you could see. you can just see it's a little thick, but it's the flavor is good. The pork really cooked down, so it's actually very tender. It's really not that bad. It's just doesn't have much flavor. If you've had blood sausage, it's not crazy different from that. Just, again, lack of flavor. Well, I'm stuffed. I got a Persian army to fight. I'll see you next week.